Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, colleagues, honorable guests, good evening. My name is the director of the Foreign Policy Council. Today I have an honor and privilege to be the moderator of the roundtable, Impact of the Current Situation in Nagorno-Karabakh on Georgia's National and Regional Security, organized by the Embassy of the Republic of Poland to Georgia, the NATO Contact Point Embassy, in cooperation with the Foreign Policy Council. Our event will be dedicated to 9 articles, which are about to be available soon, thanks to the financial support of the Embassy of the Republic of Poland to Georgia, the NATO Contact Point Embassy, in cooperation with the Foreign Policy Council. And I had a pleasure as an editor-in-chief of this publication to read almost all the articles, and I'm sure that our discussion will be very interesting and challenging. Today we have guests from different embassies, expert cycles, authors. Also, I'm very happy that when we announced about this initiative, the experts and the MFA representatives of faraway countries decided to participate, and I would like to send my greetings to our colleagues from Argentina and Uruguay. Thank you very much for being with us. Muchas gracias. And let me say a couple of words about the schedule and program of our initiative. First of all, the first person who will greet us and say a welcome speech is the ambassador of the Republic of Poland to Georgia, His Excellency Mr. Mariusz Maszkiewicz. And then after his speech, I will provide you with more detailed information about our schedule. Panie ambasadorze, dziękuję.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Grigol. Thank you for your efforts to make us closer. I'm very grateful to have such many guests, such many distinct persons from many embassies and experts. We, of course, obviously limited by pandemic, so we could not fully organize what we planned before from the middle of this year, to have such maybe not round table, but wider to discuss the problem of the security issues concerning the region we are now. And so in September, the war in Karabakh so made the situation a little bit different. So I'm very grateful that Mariusz Pietrzak, our consular from embassy, has with you, Grigol, just invented the idea of discussing these issues which are most closer, not let's say far issues, not theoretical or far from our problems that we are facing now, but very, very close, and what is the sense of our concern for Georgians and for Georgia's friends and allies. So thank you very much for this initiative and for this realization that I hope we'll have in paper or in electronic form soon after this webinar meeting of today.
Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo, panie ambasadorze. Also, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank a friend of mine, Mr. Mariusz Piotrczak for his contribution. And let me say a couple of words about the agenda and schedule we're going to face today. The first guest speaker will be Mr. Vakhtang Maisaya. His topic is the war over Nagorno-Karabakh and its geostrategic implications. The next guest speaker is Mr. Nodar Hashiladze. To be more concrete, are Nodar Hashiladze and Gela Bashadze. Their topic is the future role of Turkey in the South Caucasus region in the context of ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh. Then we're going to host Mr. Georgi Gogwadze and Sandro Megrelishvili, American military presence in Georgia, reality or wishful thinking. Then Mr. Emil Avdaliani, Russian military presence in the South Caucasus region, peacekeepers or occupants. Then we have a very interesting topic of Mr. Volodymyr Kopchak, Russian military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, risks for Armenia and Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, Mr. Kopchak will not attend our meeting. That's why I will have the privilege to say a couple of words about his brilliant article. Then Mr. Georgi Koberidze, the future role of the Minsk group in the peace-building process in Nagorno-Karabakh. Then Professor Gianodia, NATO and EU's role in the South Caucasus region in the upcoming years, Georgian perspective. Then Mr. George Medzmariashvili, NATO America's military presence in Georgia, stabilization or deepened uncertainty. And the last speaker is going to be the moderator of this evening, Grigol Julhidze, Chronicle of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and Georgian security situation of Azeri-Armenian clashes. Well, dear friends, I would like to remind you that the opinions and conclusions expressed are those of the author and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Embassy of Poland or the Foreign Policy Council. The first speaker, guest speaker of our event, Mr. Vakhtang Maisaya, good evening. Thank you very much for being with us. Unfortunately, we're very limited in time, and that's why you have about 10 minutes for your monologue, and then we have about 10-12 minutes for question and answers. Please.
Nodar, please switch your microphone off because all the noises from your hall are hearable.
And have you seen my presentation? It's available?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
we can
Keep
see.
going.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So
First,
first of all,
let me remind you again, please. Could
Yes.
you turn off your microphones and let's concentrate on the speaker's monologue. Thank you.
okay. Just first of all, I would like to express enormous gratitude to organizers of this very beautiful and more interesting event, which most beneficial to all engaged parties. And express enormous thanks to the Embassy of the Republic of Poland in Tbilisi and Foreign Policy Council, and personally to His Excellency Mr. Mariusz Paszkiewicz, and I would like to greet all just participants, my colleagues, which presented on this event. And with your permission, I will just be as short as possible because not to waste your time. So my presentation just dealing about the war over Nagorno-Karabakh and its geostrategic implications, and I would like to mention that based on the just allowance from my just institution, I will represent here the Central European Institute of Research and Strategic Analysis, CIRSA, Republic of Poland, to whose just about just staff members I just used to be since quite a long time ago. And this will be just, of course, according to Chatham House, it will be just reflect only my perception. So my name is Professor Vakhtang Maisaya. I have a PhD in politics and military sciences. I'm a professor of several universities of Georgia and Poland. So this is about my content of my just about short presentation, expression my ideas and share my views on situation, what what's been done regarding Nagorno-Karabakh, and I will call it Nagorno-Karabakh war scenario. This is about key implications I would like to just forward to your adherence. And I would like to start, first of all, just about with theoretical methodology of the geostrategic studies. It's about this methodology is used in geostrategic studies about to review military conflicts, about paces, how the military conflicts are developed and enrolled during this period of time. First of all, we have like a political escalation phase, economic war game, propaganda warfare, military political declamations, and the first and the last stage is the military confrontation phase. And namely, this Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, just the military conflict, also just been developed in that just stages, provisional cases. Like I would like to give it that political relations started in 1988 to 1992. Then it comes with economy war game between parties Azerbaijan and Armenia, which by that time declared independence, as well as with Turkey involvement, because Turkey and Azerbaijan they also just
could you turn on your microphone, Mr. Vakhtang? It is turned off right now. Hello. Yes, we can hear you right now. Yes.
Okay. So this is about how the conflict been evolved during this period in Nagorno-Karabakh political escalation phase, economic war game, a propaganda war, which still just under the way, just started in 1996. Then we have like a political declamation, flexes of muscles, like coalition creation and local intensity conflicts between 2014-2020, and last just phase was about conventional local war in November 2020. And this is like a just or introduction about how we can review from geostrategic studies methodology about Nagorno-Karabakh just development phases. And before I would like to introduce some just general terms of like geostrategy, the fourth war generation, national security tactics. It's more important to fully realize my presentation on your stage. This is about definition of what does it mean geostrategy, just about one and second definition cases. Second, about what does it mean national security dialogue. It's a new jargon, it's a new term which was introduced by the Georgian political scientists. And it's this definition also just clearly reflected where Georgia just been, unfortunately, just get in. And I would like to explain a bit later. I would like to concern your attention about what does it mean fourth generation war, which also has the following features: high technology, terrorist and guerrilla warfare as a tactics, non-national and transitional base, state versus non-state actors, a direct attack on his enemy culture, highly sophisticated psychological warfare, delivery of high-intensity, short-duration attack and creating a sense of vulnerability, debilitation, and combat abasement in the enemy ranks, about military mobility, and main goal of the force warfare is like a military deception. Goals, survival, and second, delivery a high-intensity, short-duration attack and created in the enemy sense of vulnerability and debilitations in its own region. So you can consider about the fourth war generation concludes asymmetric warfare, hybrid warfare, and cyber information warfare. I would like to mention that namely just about Nagorno-Karabakh just directly been waged in accordance to the principles of the fourth war generation. And I would like to give you concrete examples. First of all, the war being waged between the state and non-state actors, like Azerbaijani armed forces versus so-called Nagorno-Karabakh defense armies. Second, it was just very intense psychological warfare between the parties, including cyber war, mostly in the initial part of the war game scenarios, which was started in September and October of this year. Second, high technology, of course, the drones, which became like heroes of this war game scenarios, about Bayraktar, Alpagu, Turkish origin, just about military, just unmanned vehicles, and precision delivery munitions, which was used by the both parties during the war game, was like a key characteristic of the war game. Second, and of course, the third one is a military operational mobility, like a blitzkrieg military strategy implementation, which was just done from the Azerbaijani side, and concentrated attrition to gravitation center direction, like a Shusha operation, which was also conducted in each of these military operational stages cases in case. Second, let's to cut long in a short. This general geostrategic analysis of the four-war generation case Nagorno-Karabakh was based on the several principles from the both sides: high technology, short duration, flexibility, mobile forces, maneuver, and deception, which was key indications to all parties which was presented here. This is about only just about a scheme of military operation from Azerbaijani side, which was conducted during that period of time, and you can see that key just about blitzkrieg maneuvering operational case was on this on the just the vision of this map, which well in good way just described key directions and to the gravitational centers provisions during the war game scenarios. Now I'd like to skip on those concrete cases. What are the geostrategic implications and features of the Nagorno-Karabakh war? In that case, I would like to underline historic prerequisites of the Nagorno-Karabakh war. Second, political military environment and its provision. Third, new threats and risk perception and consequences. And fourth, military doctrinal features of the key geostrategical actors in the case of the Russian Federation, which also engagement or involvement of the Russian Federation from a military standpoint became a decisive part of just military war or conflict, which also stopped this case, but also Russia just anyway just foreseen its own egocentric geostrategic missions and tasks, which I would like to express a bit below. First of all, about historic prerequisites of Nagorno-Karabakh war, it should be mentioned that the Karabakh war has like 3 pages of the conflict development cases: conflict inspiration, conflict frozen just stage of the conflict, and then the frozen phase of the conflict. You can see I also indicated concrete period of times where this conflict has been inspired and how it been developed. Then when conflict was being put in the frozen manner, like in 1994 ceasefire agreement, OSCE Minsk group, then 2007 Madrid principles, which became quite decisive, and parties just hardly just even approach to have like just about a peaceful resolution of the conflict. Therefore, the third phase, refrozen phase of the conflict, which was started in 2015 with introduction of the low intensity conflict. Then 2016, 5 local war scenarios, and July, or in 2002 was both decisive, July-September, when we have like just local war and regional war informal level, which was protected during that period of time. So what was like just historic progress of Nagorno-Karabakh? You can see on that just about the indications. First of all, I would like to mention that historic just level just about approaches and Soviet legacy also became like one of the prerequisites of the steaming up the conflicts with the bloody just engagement of the geopolitical relations between the states, global shifts in contemporary world order and global confrontation between the international geopolitical powers, which we have on that cases. Of course, about military, just about political system, because all just countries were at age of the war scenarios, and their political systems were a bit close to non-liberal development, which also just flattered and favored to the war scenarios development, which was concluded in 2020, and about geoeconomic absolutely disarray and disruption, which was linked with the realization of the geoeconomic projects, which should be just been enhanced for both parties' involvement. Second, I would like to more pay attention about Russia's geostrategy towards regional security and regional hegemony aspirations of the Russian Federation. Before doing, I would like to mention that whilst engaging into Nagorno-Karabakh war and Russia just getting involved, not as a peacekeeper, but like a peace enforcement, just by request, Russia has like 4 main just about tasks. First, it was like having considering geostrategic principle military prevention, diminish further attrition of the armed forces of Azerbaijan inside in depth in Nagorno-Karabakh, and cease combat activities near city Shusha. Then disarmament, disband, and liquidation of so-called and jihadists, about which Russian foreign intelligence service is just indicated in several times mentioned about existence of such mercenaries to the local conflict areas. Reinforce Russian military in the South Caucasus and take up the Black Sea, Caucasus, and the MENA. and the fourth, military expansion of Turkey to the South Caucasus, involvement, and create favorable official Moscow balance of power. I would not mention the Russian also partially reached its just a main gain strategic vision after the Nagorno-Karabakh, because Russians geostrategical thing was based on the theoretical, classical theoretical about, especially the general Dietrich Henrik Bülow just about these modalities, about triangular operation strategic alignment modalities, and these modalities are looking like this. Here you can mention just about deployment of the unoccupied territories of Abkhazia, Tskhinvali region, and partially already in Azerbaijan, its military just bases, and of course having just about directly gravitation center directions between the base 4 and base 102, like in Tskhinvali, the occupied Tskhinvali region, in Armenia's military base. And of course, this is about how Russian views capabilities to the regional events. So this is about Russia's military capabilities, what Russia now they tailored and exploits at time of being at the regional level. But three army groups, military structures, units, and strike just weapon systems, which Russia deployed not only in the military commands headquarters south, operation strategic command headquarters south, but also which also just deployed in the southern part of the Caucasus region. Russians they just even renamed this region, mostly in the Russian foreign policy concept. It's also been regained the same name as South Caucasus, which was absolutely Russian foreign policy jargon and words. Second, Russian also reinforcing potential by creating so-called coalition of forces in the region, like a Russian Armenian military coalition and Russian so-called Abkhazian military coalition, which also just became more advanced basics for implementing a special operation of enforcement peace regarding Azerbaijan and deployment of the military base, which Russia seems to enact like a Khmeimi base, just about scenarios to the regional level. And of course, it's like Russia's just about military doctrine, just about some interesting cases about typology of military conflicts, where Russia just seems to engage in the nearest future, local, regional, and global level. And you can see just about Russia just pursued it's like a local war scenarios case when it's just engaged in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And military conflict background is considering a fast development, high mobility, local dimension, limited military capabilities. Just we directly correspond to the fourth war of generation, just about growth strategy. About Georgia, about having considering about Nagorno war consequences, I would like to mention that Georgia, we can in that way we can describe Georgia's military threat classification as a symmetric and asymmetric threat classification, which are at your just disposals. It's a general, of course, risks and challenges about metrics, which we can just consider regarding the Georgian case. And second, I would like to mention that this war game scenario also shifted and also changed geopolitical balance of power with regard to this regional scope. Why? Because I would mention that the regional security modalities, which was proposed by the Turkish President Recep Erdogan, whilst visiting official visiting in Baku just about a few days ago, it was a not novelty to the regional actors, because in several times the local regional actors they propose its own vision, its own modalities, how this Caucasus regional security should be based on and developed. I would like to remind you about Georgian initiatives about Common Caucasus House idea, which was proposed the first president Zviagam Sakhurdia, and second Georgian president Eduard Shevardnadze's proposal of peaceful Caucasus incentive. Then Azerbaijan has its own incentive, like a 3+2+2, and of course Caucasus United States, which partially been enacted during that just about authoritarian rulership of the Saakashvili and further on period of time, and it's still just nominally just active because in Caucasus format just provisional case, and Armenia's initiatives 3+3+2 and Caucasus Cooperation Regional Center, which been enacted during this 1994 till 2007 period of time, but unfortunately those incentives been suspended due to the new geopolitical locations in Georgia, not Georgia, in the Caucasus region. And last one, this new incentive about 3+3, which implies about 3 local actors like Turkey, like Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and +3 regional hegemons, Turkey, Iran, and Russia, which been proposed by the Recep Erdogan. And unfortunately, he even just didn't share these ideas with the Georgian government, the Georgian authorities. I would like it means that Georgia should be put itself in the national security deadlock, and it's not very well accepted by the Georgian considerations. And of course, as I know, just Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, Mr. Lashet Darsalia, just absolutely officially just rejected this formula regarding about how it suited the Georgian national interest by and large. And in resume, in summary, I would like to just implicate it all what I have just mentioned before or less. First of all, my main reason was to have like to more review, to have conduct a military analysis of the Nagorno-Karabakh war, about its consequences at geostrategical and geopolitical levels, and of course to consider those regional security realities which nowadays emerged over this peace agreement, which was conducted by the parties on November 10, 2020. And first of all, thank you very much for your attention. I guess no one just kept sleep during my just presentation, and looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much. I would like to, I just keep frame in the proper line. Thank you.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much for your monologue, Mr. Vakhtang. So I'd like to open a very short discussion panel about the topic that we have just talked about. And could you raise your hand if you'd like to give a question to our guest speaker? The Skype has the format for the option. If no one has a question for Mr. Maisaya, I will use the chance and opportunity as a moderator to address to you one question, and I would be very content if you could answer as shortly as possible, because we have next speakers.
I should he is a Grelian originally, to be as short as possible.
Okay. So you have talked about, in your article, you have written, and right now you have talked about the I would say the process of battle, the technical aspects and military technical supremacy of Azerbaijan over Armenia. But apart from these factors, could you say what was or were other main important factors that decided the destiny of this 44-day war?
Yes, it's quite, thank you very much for your questions. I'll try to be as short as possible. First of all, I guess the main ideas was Azerbaijan been prepared very well for these war game scenarios from the military analytical just viewpoints. And of course, he just mobilized all forces, also just try to more considering about 4 war game scenarios and strategy. And they also planned their operation in a frame of this strategical case. Of course, Azerbaijan also just created some like a alliance, just maybe we can say military political alliance with its strategic allies of Turkey and Pakistan. And nowadays, new alliance should be formed regarding of the Ukraine, Turkey, and Azerbaijan. And this alliance's policies also just promotes some kind of successes policy implications. And second position, it was just Azerbaijan prepare these military capabilities due to the economic and financial backup, which is more important because Azerbaijan, as I know, just allocated about, 4 or 5% of its GDP on the military, just expenses and just military, just budget, which absolutely becomes quite enormous just allocations. Of course, Azerbaijan also pay a lot of attention to purchase its new military technologies, which allocations Azerbaijan devoted more than $4 billion, roughly, according to some statistical data. So I guess this was a key just about successful, I would say, stories in military strategical planning and military operational, just about prerequisites, what Azerbaijan have been reached during this short war period of time against Armenian armed forces over the Nagorno-Karabakh.
Thank you very much again for your presentation. Thank you so much. Could you turn off your share screen option, and then I'll pass the microphone to our next speakers. And the next speakers will be Mr. Nodar Hashiladze and Gela Vashadze, and their topic is very interesting as well: the future role of Turkey in the South Caucasus region in the context of ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh. Once more, I'd like to ask you to turn off the microphones while the speaker is talking. Mr. Vakhtang, again, could you please turn off the sharing option, share screen option of the Skype? Well, Mr. Nodar, thank you very much for being with us.
We know each other for a long time, so Nodar, for you, you know that. Thank you very much for a very interesting idea, but thank you very much, as always. One more bright idea, and thank you very much, very needed. I would like to also use this opportunity to thank both Mariusz's, Your Excellency, and Polish Embassy for supporting such an important initiative. I mean, we were discussing today that because of our internal things, we have had very little discussion of such an important strategic developments as changes in our region, and this is a very good opportunity to do so. As I'm well aware, we have 10 to 12 minutes, me and Gela together, so I'll try to split it so to leave more time for discussion. So Turkey's role, well, things have changed, of course, and I would like to underline two things. When we're discussing somebody's role, we normally understand it as a kind of complex state issue. So yes, we can speak about it, and I will definitely talk about it a little bit. But in Turkey's case, there are two issues. There is a Turkey's national interest, and second issue is that Mr. Erdogan's political interest. Both of these issues played a role in this development in this conflict. So first of all, of course, let's start with Turkey. For the last more than a decade, Turkey tried to show to the West and to the region that it can be an independent player. There are a number of reasons, including economical development, including some problems with the West, why Turkey decided to do so. But it's obviously the fact that Turkey tries to more and more have its own political agenda in the region. At the same time, not always this was successful. If we take the cases with Egypt, then we take it early cases development with Syria, we cannot say that Turkey has managed to achieve some tangible results from there. So there were cases of the unsuccessful actions which cost dearly to Turkey, and of course it forces them to start to look for the allies in this endeavor. And one of the situation allies there was, of course, Russia, unfortunately. Unfortunately, because in Syria, West and Turkish and Western positions were different, and it turns out that Russian and Iranian position were closer to Turkish position than Western. So this was a marriage of convenience, not marriage of values. And I deeply do not believe that there is a possibility of alliance between Turkey and Russia. That is impossible because these two countries have a strategically different regions, interest in every region. In Caucasus, one supports more pro-Azeri, second is pro-Armenia. In Balkan, one is pro-Serbian, second pro-Kosovo Albania. In the Syria, one supports Assad, second is against. In Libya, so in every region they have different interests. However, they could have a very pragmatic partnerships over different issues, and Syria was one of these issues. And then it turned out that Karabakh also could be one of the issues. So, but how we came here? We came here that Turkey had a number of unsuccessful cases, and they clearly needed success to continue this policy, because more and more people in Turkish elite, in Turkish political and diplomatic cycle were questioning this policy, saying that why we are doing that if we cannot achieve any results from there? What is the purpose of this our new policy, which does not generate any tangible results? So Karabakh for a long time was the first case which in a short term and maybe in mid-term as well can be considered a clear success for Turkey. Turkey has demonstrated that it can support its ally. It demonstrated that it can be a player in the region. and it did influence, of course, increase its influence generally. However, from Turkish perspective, it's very hard to say that other than the psychological factors and some mild political factors, what will be tangible results of Turkey out of that? Now, that is, I think, a good question which needs to be discussed everywhere. I mean, what Turks got now will get, or what they already have gotten out of that. And that's the question I asked my colleague Gela when he uses his time to use it, because Turks already had a very good relationship with Baku. I mean, I don't think that they got anything additional from Baku. They were very good with them anyway, strategic allies. What I mean, they got some deployment in Azerbaijan, but it was doable before as well. So while there are some small issues which we could discuss, and definitely it's not like Turkey got nothing out of it, was it worth price? And that's, I think, the main question which needs to be answered from Turkish perspective. However, there comes the second issue, which I started from the beginning. It's a political interest of the Mr. Erdogan and his ruling party. Now, he has been long in Turkey. Nobody since Atatürk has been that long in Turkey in power. I mean, Turkey had this very similar to Western European system when they changed. In 90s, I would remember that every year they would change a prime minister. So it was kind of more dynamic and vibrant political environment. Erdogan has managed to break this cycle. First of all, because he introduced a very, very large package of reforms, including economical development. That was the first reasons of his success. But then, as opposition blamed, he got more and more authoritarian, and he started to just, let's say, adopt state institutions for his own political agenda. However, it's not that easy done in Turkey, and we have seen that in previous elections. He barely won election of president, and even worse, after that in local elections, Turkish ruling party lost 3 major cities in Turkey, namely Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir. Izmir was predictable, it's always an opposition city, but Istanbul, and especially Ankara, which is a very bureaucratically populated city, was a very, very warning call to Mr. Erdogan and his party. So they needed some kind of success story. First, they started to generate this success story internally. This project, which has to be opened right now, new huge port in Istanbul, this new straits through the Istanbul, which will be economically more profitable. It was announced to be opened in 2023. So this year it was expected to start construction of this thing. A new airport project, and also was planned to be introduced this one. So they had several good tricks in their sleeves, but COVID, of course, was not predicted event. So COVID changed many things, including that Turkey has suffered quite well economically, unfortunately. They had a very bad numbers from COVID healthcare perspective as well. I mean, worse than they would expect from the first glance. And of course, devaluation of Turkish lira did not play a good role to government's popularity. So it looked like that internally there was nothing to deliver to populations in order to increase party's popularity. And here, of course, Karabakh's opportunity presented itself. And I think that was a huge opportunity for Erdogan, which he brilliantly and very well capitalized, and he delivered totally there. Issue is that in Turkey, votes of the pro and anti-Erdogan is evenly split, and there is a very slim swing vote group, which is partially nationalist, partially liberal, who decides who will be in power. So he played on this nationalist vote, which is a Turkish party of the People's Movement, and he did a very good job for his political ratings. They are skyrocket high. He did some in Syria with a successful operation last year, but this year was something more tangible expected, and he delivered. So shortly, and I'll finish my part here and I'll go to Gela. If it's hard to say politically what Turkey as a state has gained from the active involvement, and undoubtedly there is many things to discuss. There are possibilities to see what Turkey has gained, but it became a part of the conflict, I mean, side of the conflict. And before that, Turkey always avoided to be side of this conflict. They were trying to be somewhere, at least, preferably in more arbitrary sense than the side of one of the belligerents, of course. The second question has a very clear answer. Erdogan, as his political party, has gained very, very strong standing, and it was capital victory for them on internal scale. If election held tomorrow, there is a very good chance that Erdogan wins again, because there is a huge boost of this popularity that finally Turkey has delivered. Finally, the party which was promising this new role of the Turkey in the region, brotherhood of the Turkish nations, all this propaganda which was well built on Ottoman nostalgia and all this stuff, it has delivered finally. So it might not be the victory everybody expected in globally, but it's a first step. I'm sure there will be more time to analyze and do that, but for the moment I would summarize myself that Turkey is a winner in this situation, at least in a short term, but even bigger winner is Mr. Erdogan and his party, who got a very good dividends out of this conflict. Hila, you continue at your things and I'll be sitting in your place. We have 4 or 5 minutes.
First of all, thank you very much for opportunity to participate over this conference. Let's ask the simple question: what it was, war or escalation? The Second Karabakh War or escalation of war? I think that it was the escalation at war too. And in what condition were we see two countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia, before this Second Karabakh War? First of all, we have two revolutionary processes in these countries, but if in Azerbaijan it was, in Armenia it was revolution from below, in Azerbaijan it was revolution from above. Revolution in Azerbaijan began in the 2017s when the Mehriban Pashayev became.
Yes, that's good. Yeah.
When Mehriban Pashayev became the first vice president of Azerbaijan, and it was a real big struggle between two political groups, big political groups in Azerbaijan, former political group of Ilham Aliyev's father, Heydar Aliyev, the leader was Ramiz Mehdiyev, and the political group of Pashayevs. The leader was the wife of Ilham Aliyev, Mehriban Aliyev. So, in this situation, in the beginning of this year, as with the down of price of oils, Azerbaijan authorities needs a new driver for the development of their for the authorities, and so it was necessary for them. And of course, another case is a battle in Tovuz in July, which shows that the infrastructure of South Caucasus is not secured, and so Azerbaijan needs to defend it. What about Armenia? In Armenia, process was more cruel because it was the change of whole political system. Pashinyan needs not only change political class, but change business class too, and he prepared it. He prepared a referendum for Dutch and juridical system, change whole juridical system, and of course it was a very interesting moment that Pashinyan has no good relations with President Putin, but Armenia, of course, was a fortress for Russia and was an ally of Russia. So in this situation, and very important moment that Russia, after the annexion of Crimea and occupation of Donbass, needs infrastructure of South Caucasus, logistic and energy infrastructure, because Russia has problems with Ukraine, Russia has problems with Nord Stream 2, so Russia needs the cooperation with Baku and Ankara, cooperation with Turkey and Azerbaijan. As a result of everything this, we see that Russia decide their problems. Azerbaijan decide problem of Karabakh as it was possible in this situation. Turkey decide problem of influence in South Caucasus, and Erdogan, what I've said about it, decide internal political problems. Of course, Russia decided problem that Russia peacekeepers are in Nagorno-Karabakh now, and we see it. So, but I don't think that it is end of war. It is only end of battle.
Thank you. Very, very optimistic, Guga.
Yes.
I think we can stop here to give you some time for the. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nodar. Thank you very much, Mr. Gela, for a very interesting monologue. So I give the opportunity to our listeners to address the questions to our speakers. So if some of you would like to give some specification to express his, her opinion, please feel free. Any questions? Okay, as I see, there are no questions, but again, let me use this opportunity as a moderator and address another question to Nodar and Mr. Gela. I'd like to modify a bit the subject. So a lot of, from many prominent experts and leading analysts of Nagorno-Karabakh issue and the South Caucasus say that it was an unconditional victory of Russia in this case, due to some different factors, etc., etc. But what could you say about the different opinion? Maybe it was a much bigger victory of Turkey, because right now we got in the region another strong guy who can play the balanced game against the state actor, which was always dominant in the region. And also, we have the country which is welcomed in the state in which its troops are deployed. So who is the winner in this scenario?
Well, thank you very much, Guga. The very interesting, let's say, question and logic indeed. It's hard to say. I would not agree that Russia is unconditional winner. Russia was in this region dominant power. Nobody disputed it even before this summer war. It has a very strong position in Armenia. It has occupied territories in Georgia, not far away from capital, and it had quite a strong position with Azerbaijan as well. So there was nothing that Russia has significantly gained after this conflict. I think that Turks gained more if you look from the strategic perspective, because they become part of the process which they were not part of. I mean, they were supporting Azerbaijan, of course, but they were not deployed as a part of this Karabakh settlement, which now they will be first. Second, I think, yes, Russia, of course, did not also lose a lot, because it still controls both corridors. Russia got more military presence. So, yes, Russia is also a winner, but I would not call him a solo winner or the only winner in this regard. Russia, I think, has seriously lost positions in Armenia. While Armenia understands that immediate danger, they will not survive without Russia. They know that, Armenians. But in the long term, this will be a beginning of the long distrust between Armenians and Russians, especially Armenian elites, which was now abandoned. They consider it total abandonment by Russians, because Russians decide that Pashinyan has to be punished. So in the long run, Russia lost in Armenia. Now Armenia is even more tied to Russia than it's ever been. It's understandable, but in the long term. So with Azerbaijan, I don't think that Russia gained anything with Azerbaijan. Gratitude, I mean, in politics, gratitude is not currency you can capital on. Azerbaijan now is even less dependent on Russia than it used to be because it controls more territory. So now they brought Erdogan, who is a kind of the good guy to have on your side when you talk with Russians. So I think that Azerbaijan even less dependent on Russia than it used to be. Oh yes, Nakhchivan corridor, Russians there, understandable. There is some balance, but I would not say that Baku has lost anything to Russia. I would say that they become more independent. And of course, in the end of the day, what Russia won here is two things. Again, not the only winner, definitely, but they have demolished Minsk group, definitely. I mean, they show to the West that you guys cannot do anything here, and also together with Turkey here. That was clear win by Russia. Second was that they have now controls over two very sensitive corridors, and that's also the win. However, there are other winners here. Turks, they gained the name showing to everybody that you see, we are power. Let's not forget prestige, which counts, especially in this region. Turkish military industry worked very well in this conflict. Erdogan himself, the military advisors, Azerbaijan military reform, all of that showed that there is a success story there. And that's also delivered, of course. And of course, in the end, we see the situation where we have this equilibrium shifted towards Turkey and Azerbaijan, less in favor of Armenia. And of course, Russia could find itself in this new equilibrium as well, as you all know. But I don't think that it can say that it is the 100% winner. I can't see it because I have a friends in Yerevan, lots of them defense minister, we used to work together. They don't feel anything. I mean, it will be a problem. Yerevan today starts building plans how to get independent from Russia because they just seen that they can't count on Russia. So I don't think that that's a win in a long term. Thank you very much for a very interesting and provoking logic.
Thank you very much, Nodar. I'd like to open another topic, and I'd like to pass the ball to Mr. Georgi Goguadze and Sandro Megrelishvili. The topic they're going to discuss and talk about is American military presence in Georgia, reality or wishful thinking. So, good evening, dear friends. And as I have mentioned, you have 10 minutes, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. I also want to join the team and join the people who express their gratitudes to the organizers and the moderator of this event. So we had a bit of different topic, not directly discussing the Nagorno-Karabakh issue in our paper, in our article, but definitely this war, the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, triggered the discussion and stirred the debate in Georgia, in the policy thinkers and the policy makers and the expert community, how Georgia can efficiently empower and improve its security guarantees in this very much turbulent region, right? I mean, how we can just balance the power and how we can balance the parties in the South Caucasus region. So, I mean, needless to say that this war can unpack the Pandora box in many ways, and we now see even far-rising nationalism and militarism in the region. So this is not definitely the end bullet in this process, what we see in the South Caucasus region, and all of the countries, all of the players now are going back and reviewing their homework on the risks and the security challenges that they are facing. So what we tried in our article to have a bit of theoretical perspective as well, and what we from the very scratch saw that the realism theory just a coffin of other theories in the region, and struggle to power and using the military means to solve the conflict and the territorial disputes is in the core of the international relations processes, at least in this part of the globe. So this is also very interesting because this war also and other processes, side events, let's say, also undermine the many things that the current international order is based, right? I mean, on the illegitimacy of the war and different aspects that was following these processes. So we put Georgia in, of course, in the perspective of the small states, right? I mean, which has a very limited capability, limited resources, and what we all know, we don't have a lot of options when it comes to the survival and the guaranteeing the security of the small state in international relations. We have a couple of them, and we discussed, for example, that the country itself balances the opposing party. I mean, has the capacity and the strength enough to deter another power, hostile power, which is everyday homework for Georgia, but at least achievable at this time to balance Russia by itself. Another option that we all know is to, how to say, bandwagoning with the party. I mean, to stick to the hostile party and so-called become the client state and to have a kind of assumption that based on the goodwill of the counter, the small state will be granted a certain degree of independence and freedom. And another one, of course, is to seek and join the alliances and the partnerships to maximize the deterrence power in breaking the pact. So we talked about the first one. The second one is, of course, out of option, and mainly Georgia has seen this reality in the 90s. And the third one is the most rational and logical way. And if we use this formula in analysis, it unveils why Tbilisi relentlessly tries to join the military alliance of NATO and to just bilaterally increase also the relations with the partner countries. So mainly our theoretical core of this paper is the model of deterrence, and especially the deterrence by denial, right? Which means that to dissuade an enemy by persuading it that the goal of its actions cannot be achieved. So we agree that independently it's very much impossible, and that's why we, in a partner way, seek to understand how Georgia can ensure this successfulness and efficiency of the third option. So when it comes to NATO, of course, even the constitution of Georgia and the recent kind of, and I think all of the parties in Georgia agree that the membership of NATO is the ultimate goal. But in reality, in real life time, we should understand the peculiarity of the NATO and the issue of anonymity and its political aspect as well. So this is not an easy way. And in this process, of course, countries should always seek to identify the new ways, even the bilateral relations where it can fill the gap in the security and to guarantee a bit of safeness in this perspective. Who comes first? Of course, comes the United States, based on the shared common foreign policy and the understanding. I think the United States is the country who understands the concept of the deterrence the most in the globe, and also it shares the scope of vision. Georgia is also very much interested. I mean, the safety of the Eastern European countries, safety of the Caucasus region, and promoting democracy and others. So when we talk about the wish, whether the American presence is something of reality and whether it is achievable, we of course go and see what is a practice. And the practice says that there is more than 750 military sites that the United States have outside of the country. And it includes more than 45 countries where they have the military bases. The country kind of it includes the countries like a full Western democracies. It includes the countries in the transition. It includes the countries pretty much authoritarian and autocratic. So you cannot say the variable that the United States puts its military presence in a country that only fulfills a set of criteria and etc. So it is mainly how these interests are generated, how these interests are close, and the benefits of course, the United States foreign policy agenda. So whether it is a good time or not, so there's another question, right? To seek and try to have the military presence of the United States in Georgia. Current president-elect in his kind of broad interview for the Foreign Affairs very much talks about the deterrence, the importance of the deterrence vis-a-vis Russia and vis-a-vis China. So this is very much in compliance to the current president-elect's foreign policy vision. So, and Trump's isolationism was also not a good background for the previous time. Now I think it is a bit of a greater opportunity and the possibility to at least study and understand the feasibility of this process. So we also in the article checked when and how in practice it worked, how US deterred the hostile party when it has presence in the country or two. And we have the cases of the Saudi Arabia and Iraq, and we have the different cases in the Latin American countries. We have the cases in the Middle East, and also having the US military sites, not necessarily bases, right? The sheer size is not decisive right now. So the size of the facility does not decide the kind of situation. And in the post-Soviet countries, we have also witnessed and saw after even in the early 2000s that the United States have their military sites in the countries like Kyrgyzstan and others. So it will not be the first and unique, how to say, to have the military presence of the US in Georgia in the post-Soviet sphere. So another question, are Georgians and the United States military establishment close to each other? Do they know each other? Do United States have the interest and the track record in Georgia in terms of the military cooperation? There is a huge process going, and it starts with the early 2000s, and during all of the governments of Georgia, there is a step-by-step increasing level of cooperation in the military field. And I can name some of them, I mean, including the GDRP and other programs that Georgia and the United States are doing together to increase the capability of Georgian army with involvement and with engagement of the US military personnel. And the GDRP particularly is the program which prepares Georgian forces in deterrence measure against Russia in terms of the border security and other types of securities. So not to mention the US-led Noble Partner, right, and the huge number of the US and the partner countries contingents and the military personnel in the participating in the military drills. So this is not something that is beyond of doable and achievability. So that's why I think that if there is a clear strategy, and what we recommend in this document, in this article, is that if we have the clear strategy, if we direct the resources efficiently and work with the US political centers and to have the bipartisan support in this way, this is, of course, not a short-term outcome that we can get, but in the medium and the long-term perspective, this is the thing that might support Georgia's security to deter and to be, how to say, in the shape of to balance the hostile parties. Of course, there are some challenges in this way. The one thing is that the country and the policymakers' desires, and another is the interests of the partner country in this way. But this comes through dialogue, and this comes through mutual discussion and debate. So at least there should be the discussion about it. It does not put the shadow, and it does not put the, how to say, ban on Georgia's NATO membership or like that. Vice versa, it helps Georgia to be a better equipped country for NATO. So this was a very short. I'm very happy to answer the questions.
Thank you very much, Georgi. So please feel free to give questions to Mr. Georgi Kukwadze. Any questions, any remarks? Georgi, let me use again this opportunity, and shortly I would like to ask you, how high are the probabilities that this wishful thinking becomes reality? So do we have any real, I would say, chances to get military presence somehow of the United States of America here in Georgia?
Yeah, I would say that it depends whether this becomes the priority of Georgian state, right? Whether this is the thing that you are determined to work on. As the cases, as the track record shows, again, we will not be the first and we will not be the last country where there is a US military site outside of the United States. So whether someone will ask in Washington how we can make this precedent work, there will be no such question. So because there are, I mean, dozens of the precedents now in the European, in the globe, I think. So, I mean, you cannot find the continent where you don't have a US military site there playing the deterrence role. So this is, I think, to take the proportion, the 60–70% of work is on our side in this way. Whether we are working enough and whether we are vocal enough and smart enough also to achieve this goal. So another is that we should not oversell this idea, right? I mean, you should not expect, and they should not raise the expectations in the society that by the end of the day you will receive some military base with a I don't know, capable enough to put their F-16s, etc. So again, the sheer size is not the decisive part of this process, rather than the political one. Yeah, we can again go to history and check that even one platoon of the U.S. soldiers deterred the countries to invade another country. Is it a guarantee 100% of success? No, absolutely no. And critics and skeptics might say that it will give the leverage to Russia, for example, to test and check the readiness of the US to defend Georgia, for example, whether they have their forces there, etc. So the skeptics might say that the chances of the provocations might be increased after you have such kind of presence in the country to undermine the ability of the United States to react. So, of course, I mean, I'm not naive to say that this is a road full of roses, right? I mean, there are things that we should wait and we should analyze. But going back to your question, whether this is something that is achievable or there is wishful thinking, I think it's pretty much seen in the future that if you work smart enough in this way, you can get this done.
Thank you very much, Georgi. Do we have Sandro Magralishvili online? Okay, we've got him. Would you like to add some words or make some comments on this topic? We can't hear you. Could you turn on the microphone?
I think, first of all, thanks for the opportunity and thanks for listening to our presentation. I think Georgi basically covered all the issue. What I would add and what I would highlight again is that, of course, we don't have any guarantees, and there are, again, there can be quite a lot, how to say, complications on the road, but we have to think bravely, and we have to act bravely, and we have to be active to use all our chances and opportunities to somehow increase our security. And at this time, when we see still that there are a lot of skeptics in NATO, and unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the decision-making procedure in NATO is such that they need a unanimous vote for a new member to receive a new member. I think this is a way, maybe a shorter way for us to achieve our security. So again, we have to think bravely, we have to think creatively, and why not think about US military base in Georgia? And then maybe, again, accession to NATO become much easier with military guarantees from United States. So thanks a lot again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for your answers. Absolutely share your narrative, dear friends. And now I'd like to give the microphone to Mr. Emil Avdaliani, another interesting topic, Russian military presence in the South Caucasus region, peacekeepers or occupants. I would like to remind you that this meeting is being recorded right now and will be available very soon, and also by the end of December, all the articles will be published. And good evening, Mr. Emil, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Grigol. I would like to make a correction because I've got a completely different title and it's visible in the program.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say my title.
Yes, looks like I have read the earlier version of your.
It's a different. Yeah, it's second Nagorno-Karabakh war and the return of great power competition to South Caucasus. So basically, first of all, of course, thank you very much for organizing this event, and thank you very much to you personally, Grigol. I would like to look at the Nagorno-Karabakh war from a longer term perspective a bit, because we've got already some time which passed after the end of this conflict, and we already can put this into a regional perspective, and even in the into the Eurasia-wide perspective too. And there are some interesting, I would say, interesting trends which emerged, but as I will argue, they were long in preparation, I would say, and the Nagorno-Karabakh war simply burst those trends into the open for everyone to see. But first major trend is, of course, that there is a tremendous decline of multi-vectoral foreign policy attempts in the South Caucasus, and this primarily goes to Armenia. we've known how dependent Armenia has been on Russia for decades, and how incremental this dependence was on Moscow. But there were crucial attempts by Yerevan to diversify its foreign policy, most notably after 2016 4 Days War. Attempts increased in quality, I would say, after 2018, when peaceful revolution took place in Yerevan, and all of those attempts now come basically to an abrupt end, because we now have total dependence of Armenia on Russia, even more than we had before. Basically, we have the end of those attempts which Armenian leadership has tried to, I would say, implement, has tried to make, and now we even before this conflict, we had this gradual erosion of asymmetry in Russia-Armenia alliance, and it was tilting towards Russia. But with this war, it became absolutely apparent that Armenia was simply too much dependent. And after this war, after those terms which we have following the November agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan with Russian, I would say, mediation, we have the basically no other opportunity for the Armenian leadership but to fully comply with the Russian foreign policy ideals. And this essentially means the end of Armenia's multivectoral foreign policy attempts. And this is a huge, I would say, this is a huge development, because for those who more or less are in the know of what is going on in Armenia, in how the Armenian leadership basically over the past even decade tried, various leaderships, I would say, tried to diversify its foreign policy stance. I mean, relations with Israel, relations with Iran, even some attempts to sort of, I would say, garner support in the West, even though they did not sign the agreement in association agreement with Europe in 2013. Still, attempts were made, and now this comes to an abrupt end, as I argued above. But this point actually also is connected very much to another no less important issue for Armenia, and this is the undercutting of democratic ideals which the country hoped to develop, especially since the revolution 2 years ago. So basically, when you are too dependent on Russia, and as I argued, this dependence will rather increase than decrease, you will have to comply with Russia's not only foreign policy methods, but also with Russian state policies, and I would say state organization models. So it's not so. For the sake of argument, I'm not really comparing what is better or worse. Is it democracy or non-democracy? Here I'm just arguing that democracy and non-democracy, how incompatible both models are. And this is an example what basically what we have in case of Armenia. So that's another problem, long-term problem, even a decade-long problem for the Armenian society and even foreign policy, that democratic ideals will be undercut with the total dependence on Russia. Simply saying, you will not be able to get my support unless you backtrack on multiple points of your democratic agenda. That will perhaps be the message from the official Moscow. But this Karabakh war also signaled the regress in Western peacekeeping standards, I would say. We have the November agreement, and by all standards, I would say this is not a final solution to the problem. We all know that it's quite easy for the geopolitical, I would say, circumstances to develop in such a way that you will have another, I would say, outburst of military activity in the region, even if you still have a Russian peacekeeping mission there. So even with the Russian presence, you still have a sense that not everything is a long-term there. You might have basically a worsened situation depending on geopolitical circumstances and how Yerevan-Moscow, Baku-Moscow relations develop. So the idea here is, of course, is that the Russian model of peacekeeping and generally, or I would say, conflict resolution standards sort of overstripped the Western standards, peacekeeping and conflict resolution standards. And this is, I would say, a very long-term negative development for Georgia and for the region at large. Yet another point, and I'll be quite brief in here, that's basically that this, my last point also means that the West somehow lacked adaptability, I would say, to the region, to how fluid the geopolitical conditions in the South Caucasus were. And I would say that you have a sense that you have a feeling that the West simply missed those undercurrents, I would say, of geopolitical developments in the region, which pointed towards, I would say, a much worsened situation which we received now, and the West simply missed an opportunity to be present. And I'm not saying militarily, as our previous speakers argued. I'm simply arguing even simply on a diplomatic level. We've seen sort of a decreasing level of Western activity in here, and perhaps even this includes, of course, the US position too. And the Karabakh war simply showed that we are not sort of having here a condominium style management of Turkey and Russia. I would not argue that that's the case for the moment. But there are some attempts of managing the region without the Western interference, Western presence, I would say, and how I would say how negative this could be for the region at large in the coming decade, for example. So basically, the West probably should now move to see the South Caucasus not as a monolithic entity, but to become more geopolitical in its approach. And I know that might not be agreeable, I would say, to many in the West, because the West tries to play non-geopolitical games, I would say, but being not so geopolitical in its foreign policy approach, but there is simply no other way to salvage the situation than just trying to build a transactional relations with Turkey, which would probably salvage or resolve some of the problems, try to use Turkish influence in the region so that it could probably contain Russian influence in the region to a certain level, of course. And the last point, of course, is what this larger and, as I argued, quite negative picture would bring for Georgia. And if you look at the map, you see Turkey, well, Georgia between Turkey and Russia, roughly speaking, and you also see that these two countries are peripheral to Europe, and as all the periphery in, well, throughout history, they are susceptible to foreign policy changes. And that's what we've got in Turkey, in Turkish case. I would argue that Georgia is also within this range of geographic expanse where you are peripheral to Europe and you've got larger states who are playing this card of being peripheral and trying to balance between Eurasia and Europe. And I'm quite afraid that as long as Western presence is not, I would say, increased in the region, and I'm not talking about the military stuff, simply for the moment speaking only about active diplomatic measures, economic measures, there is a fear, of course, that Georgia could too be a part of this tide where it would have to adapt to the changed geopolitical situation and try to be more, to have a more diversified foreign policy, which of course would not mean abandoning the Western approach, but would also mean building ties with all the neighbors and even perhaps with Russia, because geopolitics would simply force you to do so. So this difficult situation in the South Caucasus, manifested by the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, I would say brings more negativity to Georgia rather than positive developments. And I would say that we are in the process of deep transition when you've got the region which now entered the age of great power competition with the return of Turkey after 100 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emil, for the very interesting monologue, return of great power competition in South Caucasus to South Caucasus. So, Emil, I'd like to address to you one question. You have finished your monologue with the evaluation that the outcomes are quite negative for Georgia of this conflict, political outcomes, but I have seen many observers saying that the political outcomes of the second Nagorno-Karabakh war are even more bitter, tragic for our country, for Georgia. But from another point of view, maybe Georgia can get some opportunities and perspectives with the vacuum of the West in our region. What I mean, because Georgia is I would say that Georgia is the only pro-Western country in the region. Yes, maybe Armenia is, but does not have many options for that. Azerbaijan has quite good relations with Moscow, with Turkey, and is not aspiring towards the Euro-Atlantic integration. But maybe Georgia can get something from this reality. Maybe can get more West in here.
Thank you for your question. Yes, in one of the articles, I actually argued that this is an opportunity, indeed, as you said, that basically either the West catches this sort of an opportunity or sort of tries to use pro-Western position of Georgia not to lose the region altogether to Russia and perhaps to Turkish influence too, although in this regard I at times think that Turkish and European Western interests sort of correlate, coincide with with each other, I would say. But still, I mean, from the Western perspective, you have Georgia as the only country now able to basically state its pro-Western resolve. And indeed, this is the time, I would say, particularly with the election of the new president in the US, to use the deteriorating situation in the South Caucasus, not only for Armenia and Azerbaijan, but generally for the Western efforts, and to use this opportunity to advance, I would say, the US EU interest in the region. I would argue that the West should be interested. Again, much will depend how what will the U.S. foreign policy be from January. I would say that some positive signs are already there, at least from the statements of the president-elect. And I would say that the negative impact of the Nagorno-Karabakh war could somehow show to the West that if not increasing its influence in Georgia, the West might simply lose, in a way, I would say, lose sort of the road to the Caspian Sea, to the oil, to the gas, because Georgia indeed serves as a gate to the heart of Eurasia.
Thank you very much, Emil. Any questions? Okay. The next topic that we were going to cover is the topic analyzed by Mr. Volodymyr Kopchak, Russian military presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, risks for Armenia and Azerbaijan. A very interesting article, I mean, two articles that have been written by Mr. Kopchak, and unfortunately Mr. Kopchak isn't here and is not attending our event. That's why I would like to say a couple of words about his very interesting paper. Mr. Kopchak talks about the political outcomes of post-bellum agreement between Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, and the Russian Federation. And also he perfectly describes pre-war processes in Armenia and Azerbaijan. How the government of Ilham Aliyev, I would say, modified different doctrines and consolidated military power by appointing younger officials and officers in the Azerbaijani army. Also, it was very important to, I would say, to find out a very interesting term, Skinvalization and Syriaization of the agreements that we got. So what does it mean? It means that Russia may try to play the same game in Nagorno-Karabakh region as in South Ossetia, so-called South Ossetia, Skin Valley region, and start the distribution of Russian passports, which may provide Moscow with additional elements of influence over these territories and over Azerbaijan, first of all. But also he emphasized the fact that due to the Turkish presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, the scenario of Skinvalization of Nagorno-Karabakh is not from the category of high probability chances, and the worst outcomes of this process may be the Syriaization of the environment. So it is a very interesting article of Mr. Volodymyr Kopchak, which will be available very soon. And the name of this article is Russian Military Presence in Nagorno-Karabakh, Risks for Armenia and Azerbaijan. Another topic, dear friends, we have another guest. Our guest is Mr. Georgi Koberidze, who will talk about the future of the Minsk group and exactly naming the, I would say, title of his monologue in the article is The Future of the Minsk Group in Nagorno-Karabakh. Georgi's article is mainly concentrated on the description of the Minsk group activities from the very beginning till today. And there are some predictions, but very prudent predictions about the future of this format. Georgi, Good evening, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone to attend this meeting. Well, my manuscript and article is really about Minsk Group and its failed activities, actually, not successful activities, because all the proposals, all the plans which they proposed actually failed because of several different political and internal, domestic and or foreign reasons. Well, I have to start with very earlier days when ceasefire agreement into the Bishkek in 1994 actually created the so-called line of contact, which was a front line between Azerbaijan and Armenia, not the actual peace line or line of demilitarization or something like that. But actually, it was a real evidence where two forces just killed each other almost daily basis. We can even say that, especially in the earlier days in 1994. Well, Minsk Group was the whole idea behind the Minsk Group was to propose the resolution of this conflict, and this group made up this 11 different members, actually Armenia and Azerbaijan also are the part of this Minsk Group, but the co-chairs are France, Russia and USA. These three countries could do something great for this conflict and then even provide the real tangible resolution, but they failed different reasons. Well, from Azerbaijani point of view, there are several reasons behind that. Especially one of the most important reasons which Azerbaijan also want to underline it is that into the Russia, into the France, and into the United States, there are several thousand Armenian diaspora, which have greater influence into the local or even national level of politics, especially into the France and especially into the Russia, but also in United States, where into the California there are hundreds of thousands Armenians which live into the Los Angeles. But nevertheless, this Minsk Group tried to provide some kind of proposals, but let me clear some of them, especially most popular, which called the package plan. This package plan proposed into the 1997, and it was about the whole idea behind the package plan was to deoccupy and liberate the lands around the former autonomous oblast of Nagorno-Karabakh. And also IDPs had to return into their homes peacefully, and then final resolution had to came when both sides just agreed to set aside their differences and start the negotiation, the legal status of Nagorno-Karabakh. But one component was very problematic, and that this component was not territorial control at all, no, but this component was about IDPs. No one wanted Azerbaijani people into the Shusha and into the Stepanakert or into the other smaller or greater cities around or into the Nagorno-Karabakh, because they did not trust each other, and they even right now do not trust each other, which is real in one of the main problems of this conflict. Especially into the Stepanakert, Armenian ruling Armenian forces thought that if IDPs, Azerbaijani IDPs, came into the homes, they would just using some military force to revenge and started re-escalate new conflict. Well, one very interesting point is Article 10 into that package plan, proposed package plan. And that Article 10 was about the status of future status of Nagorno-Karabakh, and into that article there was some kind of innuendo about future of this region. And into that article there is some understanding that Nagorno-Karabakh would have actually its own constitution, and especially its own right to conduct into the internal affairs totally freely. That would mean that Nagorno-Karabakh would gain the status of highest autonomy into the world. Well, that failed. That failed because authorities into the Armenia, which pressured by Nagorno-Karabakh authorities from Stepanakert, denied to agree that plan, and that plan actually failed. But second plan actually was much more interesting, because second plan was also proposed into the 1997, several months later, after this first plan failed, and that plan named after the process. I want to explain very clearly. The name of that plan was step-by-step plan, which the whole content of this plan almost exactly the same as package plan, but there was one different timeline when Armenian forces had to liberate territories around the Nagorno-Karabakh. And that process also gave the Armenians much more significant time to step by step resolve the conflict. And actually, President of Armenia, Ter-Petrosyan, agreed that plan. And also Heydar Aliyev into the Baku also agreed that plan. So everything went well, smoothly, but not so fast, said Nagorno-Karabakh authorities, because they denied, they did not want to live under the flag of Azerbaijan, even though that meant that Azerbaijani control over Nagorno-Karabakh were very fragile and also very long term, and nobody knows it went very well or not. But they denied, and there was some clashes into the Armenian capital, and Ter-Petrosyan's government into the Yerevan failed, and Robert Kocharian, who was then the prime minister of Nagorno-Karabakh, became the president of Armenia after Ter-Petrosyan failed. So that was huge event which happened into the Yerevan. Well, third proposal was much more complicated, because it called common state proposal, which made by Russia, and the whole idea behind the common state proposal was that Nagorno-Karabakh should become almost completely independent state within the state of Azerbaijan, and it would have a status of republic. That was clearly and evidently became the clause into the agreement, well, proposal, not agreement. Baku denied to agree that proposal, because that meant that the whole idea of territorial integrity of Azerbaijan just failed miserably, and they knew it. But Kocharian's government tried to promote this plan, tried to say that this plan was a good plan, and authorities into the Baku tried to derail this whole process of negotiations, which generally was not true, because Azerbaijani government just tried to held the whole idea of territorial integrity. Well, after that, no plane came several years, but behind the doors, there was some kind of negotiations between official Yerevan and official Baku. But in 1999, there was a tragic events occurred into the Yerevan when military some military men or armed group, we can even say that, tried to overthrow the government and entered into the parliament building and killed not just the speaker of parliament but also prime minister of Armenia, and they clearly demanded to stop any kind of negotiations with Baku, and they made it. Yerevan stopped any kind of negotiations with Baku, especially behind the doors. Well, afterwards, before 2007, no major plan proposed by Minsk Group, but they deliberately tried to provide some statements and some ideas behind this whole process of negotiations. But in 2007, they made and they created the whole new plan, which called Madrid Principles. Well, named after Madrid, where they held the meeting and promulgate the whole principles. Well, principles was actually same as earlier principles that the occupation of Azerbaijani 7 regions around the Nagorno-Karabakh, and also IDPs had to return their homes, and then deployment of the peacekeeping mission and so on and so on. But there is one greater and major shift from the initial proposals, and this shift was about determination the status of Karabakh through the referendum, which was also meant that Nagorno-Karabakh would become independent states, at least if this referendum would hold. Official Baku denied completely, and they said that no, we never agree that kind of ruling. So as early as 2011, almost any real negotiations just stopped before even this war. So during and after this war, position of France, position of United States, and position of Russia was very complicated. First of all, President Macron, French President Macron, even officially said that Turkey and Azerbaijani politicians were warmongers, and they tried to just deliberately change the peaceful negotiations and derail the peaceful negotiations and potential of peace into the region. And then Senate of France promulgate the idea of independence of Nagorno-Karabakh, which was unimaginable, because I want to reiterate that France still is a co-chair of Minsk Group. Then there was a United States. Donald Trump said very clearly that Armenian people are great people, and he wanted to negotiate with Armenians and through Armenian negotiations and Armenians. He tried to then stop Azerbaijani military offensive. Not aggression, actually. He never used that word, but that offensive or military action into the Nagorno-Karabakh. But then Joe Biden, now president-elect, but before that he was only candidate, also say that Russia was a part of the conflict, and the Russians also tried to encourage both sides, as well as Turkey, and Azerbaijan was the true military warmonger into the region. And then there was and still is Russia, who since the first Nagorno-Karabakh war tried to militarize that conflict once and for all. Russia tried to provide more than $2 billion military equipment into the Armenia, and also Russians tried to sell their weapons also to the Azerbaijan. And beyond that, I want to underline that the Gyumri military base into the Armenia is only one legal military facility into the South Caucasus, and that one legal military legal military facility, Russians tried to provide military support to Armenia, and after this conflict, Azerbaijani government sees that Russians just helped and supported the Armenian, Nagorno-Karabakh cause to survive, to even survive at this on the ground. So after this conflict, Minsk Group's opportunity and possibility to really influence on the conflict significantly diminished, after even President Aliyev also said that he do not trust the France as a co-chair of Minsk Group. Therefore, he demanded the whole change of whole internal structure of the Minsk Group. Therefore, nobody knows how Minsk Group will operate future, but now the trust, at least from one side, is very low, and therefore the ability of that organization is also very low, which is sad, because now real opportunity is now in the hands of Russia into the South Caucasus conflict, into the Nagorno-Karabakh. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Georgi. I have a couple of questions, and if others would like to address to you some comments, I'd like to ask you first of all about the credibility. As we know, current state of affairs in Armenia is a bit different than it was before the war. So right now we see the demonstrations in Yerevan, and not only in Yerevan. We see the discontent of Armenians all over the world, everywhere, in regard to the post-bellum agreement. And do you see any risk of not meeting the agreement conditions from Yerevan in case of the change of the government?
Well, that is a great question and very hard to answer, but I do believe that Yerevan does not have any kind of opportunity to now derail the realization of this agreement. And beyond that, there is one catch. Azerbaijan military forces try to push and have some kind of pressure on the Armenia, and if something goes wrong, maybe Azerbaijan will use some kind of military politician pressure on Armenia, and now Armenia is not the position when it can change something on the ground, at least several months in future.
Thank you, Georgi. And another question. Well, how do you evaluate the future of Armenian-Azerbaijani relations? So, of course, we're the representatives of the academic and research field of international relations, and we don't like predictions. But anyway, Can we expect that the bilateral relations between Baku and Yerevan will be stabilized in the near future? I mean in near future, about 10, 15 years, or it is not really possible?
Well, if they agree on the legal status of Nagorno-Karabakh, then yes. But any other kind of case, they can't do real tangible. They can't achieve real tangible. Well, how can I say this? Not peaceful, but warm, real relations. At least they can't achieve
constructive relations.
Yeah, constructive relations, because they always try to use military as their one of the most important key to change something on the ground, or to provide support to each other's causes. So therefore, I do not believe that in the near future, if something, some real tangible change do not achieve, especially in the way of legal status of the Nagorno-Karabakh, then I do not believe that the real change can happen.
Thank you very much, Georgi. Thank you so much for your very interesting monologue. Also, I have had a pleasure to read your article and reflections. And that's why I dared to address to you a couple of questions. And right now, I'd like to pass the ball to our next speaker. According to our plan, the next speaker is Mr. Georgi Nodia, but currently he's not available, and I'm sure, and I believe that Professor Nodia will join us a bit later. That's why I'd like to address our microphone to Georgi Mezmariashvili. Georgi, you have written a very interesting article about NATO-US military presence in Georgia, stabilization or deepened uncertainty. So we have very limited time. That's why try to concentrate and focus on the most important issues, and then questions will come to you. I guarantee that.
So my article is about NATO-US potential military presence in Georgia. So these issues have been mentioned above, but I think that main thesis and main aim of my article is to level up the consciousness, the political consciousness in Georgia, and also in Brussels and also in Washington, that it is the urgent need for Georgia's close involvement in the NATO field of operations, and need for a qualitative expansion of US military political support for Georgia. And here the key notion and the key word is military political support, because I will try now to substantiate this vital importance of the significant strengthening of US-Georgian military political ties and Georgia's NATO integration. And why? We know that in the context of Georgia-NATO relations, at the level of observers and experts, alternative proposals are sometimes explicitly expressed that to accelerate Georgia-NATO's integration, which will not depend on Georgia's actual control over the occupied territory. So such potential of the integration process may acquire even more prominent forms on the path of Georgia's NATO relations in the future. What is the model for such a full and speedy implementation of the integration process? Such model for Georgia's NATO integration might be considered according to which official Tbilisi becomes the NATO member, but Article 5 is collective defense, so-called collective defense, does not apply to the occupied territory until conflict and the Russian proper occupation are resolved peacefully. So not as such, but likely precedent existed when West Germany became a member of NATO, and 25 years later, East Germany joined it. So what is key, not the problems, but key obstacles against such views? There are concerns and opinions among some Georgian citizens and various, social political actors that Georgia's integration into NATO in such a form, above mentioned such a form, will minimize the future chances of restoring territorial integrity and in fact will signify their eventual loss. So such views and attitudes are quite widespread, even those parts of society which generally support and advocate for NATO integration. So I will try, to express main arguments against this vision. So we can say exactly that experience, full experience of recent historical, political, and military conflicts and its analysis show that with the current status quo and resources, Georgia is completely, I will say completely powerless to fundamentally change the situation for the better concerning the occupied territories. And due to the current geopolitical situation and the aggressive, expansive military political strategy of the Kremlin in recent years, the risks of further violation of Georgia's territorial integrity and loss of control over even more territories is very high. We know that the process of Crimean occupation is an ongoing process. It is an active political process. It is constant targeted gradual arrest of local Georgian citizens, the capture of Georgian villages, and the ongoing expansion of the occupation zone, etc. So there are also growing threats corresponding to the development and implementation of strategies in Russia aimed at provoking another fundamental and large-scale military political provocation to further undermine, disrupt, and occupy Georgia's territorial integrity, and further weakening Georgia's statehood and hampering its aspirations towards the Euro-Atlantic area. So I will say that for the above-mentioned high probability risks, it is an under urgent need that deployment of U.S. military bases must, it is not only an urgent need, but it is functionally very important, not only for Georgia, but also for Euro-Atlantic area and Euro-Atlantic politics. Why? This acceleration of NATO integration processes and maximum involvement of Georgia in its military, I will say military political space is vital. Why? To protect the territory and sovereignty of Georgia, even within the borders, outside the occupation zones, and to provide the necessary military political support, which will be an important and accountable deterrent to Russia's occupation and aggressive military political steps. And second, the protection and strengthening of Georgia within its de facto controlled territory will be also a significant step forward to make much bolder, stronger, long-term development strategies on the path of economic, political, or military development. And this in turn is a necessary precondition for the stable economic development of the country and as a South Caucasus region as whole, because the stronger protected and developed and prepare is Georgia. So it is Georgia will be able to have a greater chances of solving the problems of the occupied territories through mutual involvement and peaceful means. And why it is very necessary to understand that Russia continues its aggressive occupation policy. While in the already occupied Abkhazia and South Ossetia, it is slowly trying to implement annexion policy and their maximum integration into the Russian Federation. And what is the main here? The notion that Russia will relinquish control of Abkhazia and South Ossetia and stop occupation once Georgia rejects NATO aspirations is completely unfounded. The relevance of this thesis is confirmed by every stage and stretch of Russian-Georgia relations for almost 2.5 centuries. And Georgia stayed face-to-face with Russia without an ally. The Kremlin always violated those agreements. And also, it is also a very important subject here, that misconception that expanding support of NATO and the United States could provoke Russia. The analysis of recent years clearly shows the opposite. More the West reduced its military political support resources in Eastern Europe, more aggressively Russia became. The more Europe faltered on the path to expanding support and partnership in Eastern Europe, the more Moscow used it as its own to spread aggressive imperial policies. We know that 2008 war and occupation, invasion of Donbass, annexation of Crimea, and so on. So, with strong military political integration into NATO and maximum mobilization of resources and mutual efforts to achieve this, Georgia, therefore, signs minimization of the above-mentioned threats and the future creation of a much heavier and stronger political, economic, military infrastructure background in the face of the challenges facing the even occupied territories. And what about the deployment of US military bases? Also, yes, will help Georgia achieve the same goals that I have mentioned above. Also, it will carry out a deterrent function against Russia's imperial aggressive occupation policy. And this is in turn is a necessary precondition for further strengthening and expansion, yes, of the Euro-Atlantic democratic or economic political values and institutions in this region. And why? This is especially important nowadays in the light of the growing geo-economic and political field in recent years. We have spoken, yes, about these issues. And this geo-economic and political field now is full of unpredictable, hostile, and dangerous challenges to democracy, especially if we take into account the recent geopolitical changes. The Russian army, in addition to Georgia and Armenia, is already stationed in the Karabakh region now, and is actually expanding and strengthening the geopolitical military loop. And what is also very important here? This is very important. It was, but nowadays it became also very important politically and economically for the West. It is a region that is the only east-west corridor between Eurasia and Europe that does not pass through Russia or Iran, but passes through Azerbaijan and Georgia. Therefore, South Caucasus is a critical east-west corridor for power lines, telecommunication pipelines, air traffic, and so on, and potential rail lines and so. As a result, the growing comprehensive military political assistance of NATO and the United States and the expansion and the strengthening of the partnership with Georgia are vital to ensure the sustainable development of this region, vulnerable democratic, social, political, and economical institution. For the region to be able to fulfill the function of the above-mentioned important trade, economic, and political corridor, in which economic and political processes will take place in a democratic, peaceful, free, secure, and stable environment. And naturally, it is difficult to talk about exactly when and what pace it is possible to implement the processes of this intensive expansion. But I want to demonstrate this urgent need to start these processes as soon as possible, and to develop appropriate long-term strategic approaches for its practical implementation in the USA and NATO. This is vital not only for Georgia as vulnerable democracy in the face of Russian aggression, but as well as for the Euro-Atlantic area, for the future economic, political stability and strength of which the protection and development of democratic institutions and economic structure in the Caucasus region are extremely important for them nowadays and in the future. So it will be significantly very important for them. It is crucial and
thank you, Georgi. Thank you, Georgi. I have a very short question because the time is up almost for this panel. And may such kind of narratives that NATO and the US military personally will be deployed in Georgia, may such kind of narratives grow the opportunities for Russian propaganda?
Grigor, your voice is...
Hello, can you hear us?
Can you...
Now, can you hear me, Georgi?
Sorry, Grigor, can you...
No, you know, right now I'm talking to you about so you don't understand what I'm saying right now because you don't hear me. Okay, let's change right now the topic. Thank you very much, Georgi, for your interesting monologue. I was going to address to you the question, but due to some technical drawbacks, it is not possible. But yes, a bit later, we'll have the time for that at the end of our discussion. And right now, I'd like to present another speaker of our discussion.
I haven't heard the question.
Thank you, Georgi. Let's talk later because there are some kind of technical drawbacks. Okay, right now we've got another speaker, Mr. Gyanodia, professor of Ilia State University, and the topic that we're going to cover is the NATO and EU role in the South Caucasus region in the upcoming years. What we can expect from NATO and the European Union in the near future. Thank you very much, Mr. Gia, for being with us. Could you turn on the microphone? It is turned off.
Yes, now I turned on microphone. You hear me? Yes, so hello everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting event. So my written paper was not at all about Karabakh war. I did not analyze that, but after having listened to all the presentations, I still want to link these my ideas also to the results and impact of the Second Karabakh War or Second Karabakh Battle, if you wish. So we talked about you know, relative kind of winners and losers. Winners at this conflict, that there is no outright winner, that nobody is 100% happy, that Russia won something, but it's not happy about Turkey getting stronger. Turkey is winner, but we don't know how much exactly its role has increased actually in the South Caucasus, etc. But I think we can say that we have a more or less clear loser in this war, and that's the West. So, I mean, we listened to the presentation about the Minsk group, how Minsk group became kind of irrelevant. Of course, it did not happen as a result of this war. Minsk group looked quite important for a long time, but somehow this conflict drew the point to the end that Russia showed that it's the boss as compared to the West. So it has real influence, while the West has very symbolic influence. And yes, Turkey has strengthened its position, but we never mentioned, unless I missed something, in this context, that Turkey actually happens to be a member of NATO. Turkey strengthened its position, that's for sure, in the South Caucasus, but it does not in any way translate into strengthening of NATO position in the South Caucasus. So arguably, it's other way around. The war, the outcome of the war strengthened Erdogan's position. Erdogan's policy, credibility of Erdogan's policy for his own constituency. And this policy is that Turkey should act on its own as an independent kind of regional player, and it has to cooperate or compete at the same time with another major regional player, which is Russia. Okay, maybe Iran's views should be taken into account, but the West should be excluded from the game. And so Turkey, it's better for Turkey basically not to coordinate with the West. And in that case, Turkey is more successful. So Turkish victory is actually also not the victory of the West in this case. And as a result, Georgia, I think, is even more isolated in the region when it comes to its foreign policy orientation, because all of the major countries, major players, are either anti-Western or kind of still not terribly friendly to the West. So it was also mentioned that Pashinyan was basically punished by Russia for his pro-Western, relatively pro-Western policies. I mean, you cannot get more pro-Western leaders than Pashinyan. Even, of course, we understand that his options were quite limited anyway, and Armenia would anyway be dependent on Russia, but even Pashinyan's kind of rhetorical change in the direction of more balanced policies were sort of punished, and that's, I think, the message that the Armenians got. Of course, Armenians understood that Russia is a very unreliable ally, but my guess is that Armenians knew it all along, but they also kind of saw the reality that Armenia is unreliable but indispensable and the only protector of Armenia. So that's kind of the message that Armenians got. So even that small drift towards the West in Armenia, that got them into trouble. So that's, I think, their perception. So that means that the West, as I said, Western position in South Caucasus has become weaker, and that's exactly, and in that sense, indirectly, Georgia is also a loser in this war, because we expect the West to be strong. We want the West rather to be strong. We want the balance of power between the West and Russia to change rather in the direction of the West, but at least perception is that in the short run, the West lost. Of course, one can speak about prospects for the middle and long run tendencies, but that's notoriously dangerous, because we don't know what will happen, but we know what have happened, and we know what are the immediate reactions and immediate results of this war. So in that sense, it's bad for Georgia, but we can cherish some hope that maybe exactly because we are so isolated in the region, or we are the only ones who are really committed to Western integration and being ally of the West will sort of recognize our value more, and will try to reverse this tide of losing influence in the region, and so actually it will have a motivation to strengthen its cooperation with Georgia, especially in strategic as well as economic sense. That's a scenario, that's the possibility, but of course it's only speculation. We cannot be sure that this will actually happen. It may happen or maybe not. But my main That's kind of background and my analysis of the changing background in the South Caucasus as a result of the war. But if we look at times ahead, I don't know, 10 years or whatever, it's not only about predicting what will happen, and it's difficult to predict, but I focus more on what we expect and what we want, what our demands from NATO, European Union are. And that's not so obvious, that's not so clear. On the surface of it, one may say that, okay, we want membership in both organizations, but we are not getting that. I think, okay, again, there may be some unexpected changes, or Rumsfeld said unknown unknowns, and then the Western, as a NATO or European Union, attitudes change. But if we base our predictions on the trends of the last years, it's very unlikely that somehow NATO and European Union will change its kind of reluctant mood in relations to the South Caucasus, that we should be there, we should be influential, but we should not overcommit ourselves to that. I think that's the trend, and so far we don't see any indicators of change. So that we will not get. Of course, it's extremely unlikely that we'll get any progress in the most painful issue for Georgia, the issue of occupied territories. Nothing any similar to Azerbaijan's success, let's say so, partial success at least, is to be expected in Georgia. So, and I think we all understand that more or less. So if that's the case, then what it is exactly that we expect, what we realistically can expect. It's not what we wish, it's not what we dream of, but what we can realistically expect. And to be brief, I kind of defined 4 headings for those expectations, which Georgia has traditionally had and still has, where the West, as represented by NATO, or as represented by European Union, or maybe as represented by United States government, or some other powerful nation states like Germany, for instance, what can we expect from them to happen so that things have a change for the better for our country. So one of the headings is recognition. I called it recognition, and that's kind of, if we look at international relations theory, is kind of constructivist part of my approach, that it's often said, and I agree with that, that to start with, our pro-Western integration is not to be explained by realpolitik, but more like our identity perception, self-perception of our identity as understood by political elites. And it's very important for Georgia to be to recognize itself and to be recognized by others as a European nation, as a part of the West, part of the Western culture. I guess that this is our kind of leitmotif, so to say, of our policies and national identity, more or less since Tergdale Ulebi, since 19th century. I think the great boost to our European self-perception was given by the First Republic. And of course, it was a very important topic for us since late 1980s, since national movement, anti-Soviet national movement. So it is very important for us to consider ourselves Europeans, because we are not really sure that we are Europeans. We want to be, but are we already? It's not so clear, but it's also, but of course with that NATO and European Union can hardly help, but it's also very important that Europeans recognize us as Europeans. And now, of course, when it comes to European Union, relations of Georgia and European Union, our chief demand is being given some kind of even vague and long-term European perspective. That is recognition that Georgia is a European country, which would imply that one day, maybe in 20 years, 30 years, I don't know, Georgia can actually become member of European Union. But it's not forthcoming. We cannot be sure that it will be forthcoming, but there is some progress. For instance, in association agreement, we are mentioned in preamble as a Eastern European country. So we are Eastern European, but not fully European. It's kind of strange, this European EU jargon, but that's the state of affairs. But I argue that, yes, that's important, what will be written in some European documents or NATO documents, so that officially we are recognized as Europeans. That's important, but the real kind of variables, the real issues is whether it's not about some formulas in some documents, but about really how the people in the West see us. I would say that the very fact of Rose Revolution and its aftermath dramatically changed the perception of Georgia. So we somehow, they started to recognize us more as European and also judge us by higher standards. That's, of course, very important. There's important linkage. If you're considered Europeans and you are judged also according to higher standards. Then, of course, 2012 is also important landmark. The constitutional change of power. It's also increased our prestige, and more Europeans started to perceive us as Europeans. But our latest developments, the outcome of our elections, last elections, and the outcome is not, it's not important who won. It's important, of course, very important for the winners and losers, but the real outcome is that we are going to have single party parliament, and whoever is right and wrong about boycott of parliament, or whether whatever was the scope of falsification and whether boycott is justified, that's a very important topic for our internal discussions. But for the country prestige, the outcome is that we've got a single party parliament, so we are less European in that sense than Europeans thought about us. So I think when it comes to this recognition, yes, it's important to advocate for certain wording being included into certain documents, but basically at this point, especially because Europeans and Westerners in general are reluctant to greater kind of giving us greater hopes, it's more important what will happen in Georgia, whether we will prove ourselves as being part of the West in a cultural or civilizational sense. Then the second is the security issue. And I guess that I don't have too much time about that. I sort of mentioned the main issues about that, you know, we are unhappy about insufficient involvement of the West. We discussed today also this new prospect of not a prospect or maybe new dream or new wish of direct involvement of US troops, some kind of on the ground, which is maybe a wonderful idea, but so far not terribly realistic. And it's normal for us to be kind of disappointed that the West does not provide sufficiently firm security guarantees for us. But I think there is still a strong consensus that even though I also agree that I would wish the West to be much more involved and much more committed to security of the region in general and security of our country in particular, but still we should remind ourselves more often maybe that these 30 years, the last 30 years or almost 30 years of independence is the best time of Georgia's history for many centuries. We have not been a country for a long time, a country of this size, this achievement is our achievement, of course, but it's also due to Western support. Without Western support, even that would not be achievable. So it's very important to try to take advantage of any opportunities of even closer cooperation with NATO and European Union, but even this, so the most important thing is not to get down also from the level that we already have. The third is democracy, and it became kind of almost notorious that we cannot talk to each other anymore without mediation of Western ambassadors. So the West has a very, very important not only stake but a role in Georgia's democratization. This is kind of tacit assumption which everybody accepts and everybody recognizes that without direct involvement sometimes in the turning points of our history of Western actors, our political regime would be very different. I mean, it's not democracy anyway. The Western influence is not strong enough to make us fully democratic. We are kind of hybrid regime, but still we are in this hybridity and uncertainty. We have been a little bit closer to democracy than to autocracy, and we can look, of course, at our neighbors. We are, despite all our shortcomings, we are truly a beacon of democracy in a way, regionally speaking, and the Western influence has been very, very important. Although it's also very risky because as the Western players and indirectly ambassadors get more directly involved in our internal political controversies, they are also blamed for any mishaps and failures, and we also see that on TV basically. So that's a very complicated issue, but I think anyway we cannot isolate the issue of security and strategic issues of Western integration from our internal development of political system, which continues to be very uncertain, is even more uncertain today than, I don't know, half a year ago. And last but not least, I don't really write about it in my paper, but just I have to mention it, that of course economic development is very important motivation for our Western integration. This deep and comprehensive free trade agreement has been the most important achievement on paper at least, but we have this disappointment that this achievement has not so economic growth, and economic growth, that part of economic growth which depends on cooperation with Europe. So that will be certainly an area to watch in the coming years. I hope I did not abuse my time frame too much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gia, for your wonderful monologue. Well, the most frequent question after the termination of the, I would say, combat phase of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict in Georgia was how it affects our society and the future of our country. And when I was working on this topic, Mr. Gia, I found out your very interesting interview, and that's why I used it in my article, and it perfectly illustrates the outcomes for Georgia of this conflict. Neither the West, neither the war, nor the conditions for its end have directly affected us. Both the ethnic Armenians and Azerbaijani communities in Georgia have supported their comrades separately, but they have not created problems with each other. Nothing could be argued. Nothing has happened that would have seriously damaged Georgia's relations with any of the countries. Both of them still need good relations with Georgia, and in such case, this interest is mutual. So I was going to address to you some questions, but you have talked about many issues and you have just anticipated my questions and answered to them. That's why if some of our listeners would like to give a question to Mr. Gia, please feel free. If not, I will summarize our meeting and talk on the topic which was the topic of mine, and this topic was Chronicle of Nagorno conflict and Georgian security situation in this context of Azerbaijani-Armenian clashes. I would like to focus on the outcomes, and that's why I'm not going to describe the details related to the military operations and the process. I would like to start by saying that one thing is absolutely clear, that Turkish influence has noticeably grown in our region together with the victory of Azerbaijan. Is it good? I mean, the growth in the presence of Turkey? Well, hard to say, because in this case, official Ankara is represented in our region as the state actor with extremely self-oriented geopolitical interests. We can say that the growing presence of Turkey has automatically brought more NATO to the South Caucasus, since Erdogan's views mostly radically differ from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's rhetoric. However, the dynamics of modern international relations illustrate how quickly dimensions and circumstances may change in world politics. It means that in the future, a growing Turkish presence in the neighborhood of Georgia might become more NATO in the South Caucasus region. But of course, this hypothesis fully depends on the political processes in Turkey. Does the fortification of Ankara's regional status mean the weakening of the Kremlin positions? I would answer to these questions with yes and with no. Yes, because Russian influence over Azerbaijan has been noticeably diminished. I argue that it has been diminished. Plus, another heavyweight state actor, Turkey, has entered the South Caucasus region, which is quite negative news for Russia. Right now, I'd like to emphasize the supporting arguments for no. Well, no, because now Moscow possesses firmly consolidated positions in Armenia, despite negative attitudes of the vast majority of Armenians due to extremely passive participation of Russia in Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and increased military contingent in the hostility zone. But the outcomes are not only negative for official Tbilisi. The current state of the South Caucasus affairs shows that this region has only one state actor with extremely, I would say, pro-Western aspirations and options. Maybe Armenia, as I have already mentioned, has pro-Western aspirations, but not options, really. This dimension provides Tbilisi with more opportunities to become a Western, I would say, bridgehead, attract more investments and benefit from intensified relations. But of course, all this depends on political ability and will. Another issue is the transit function of Georgia. Many experts claim that the potential termination of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict will lead to the loss of Georgia's economic artery role. However, I don't agree with this opinion. First of all, it requires a quite long time to re-establish Azerbaijani-Armenian relations on a constructive level. Another point is Azerbaijan will not build a gas, oil, or railway pipeline through Nakhichev and via Syunik, as these are very important economic dividends, and if you make it through the territory of a hostile state, it means that you are holding its main economic arteries hostage. And also imports of Turkish products in Azerbaijan reached 1.65 billion in 2019. A significant part of them was transported by land or air corridor of Georgia. If this is reality, and if this reality generally changes the I would say the status of Georgia, I don't think so, because it will, yes, reduce the geopolitical weight of Georgia, but mostly insignificantly, and will not pose a threat to the existing gas or oil pipelines, which are one of the main energy arteries for the European Union. And the last issue I would like to say and figure out from the benefits of the current picture of post-bellum dimension is the fact that Georgia remains the only country that has an unchanging and unwavering pro-Western and independent foreign policy, pro-Western positions and independent foreign policy from the Kremlin. What Russia has been able to do in Armenia and Azerbaijan, it failed to do in Georgia. Despite the war in 2008, the Kremlin has not able to remove this important, I would say, country, geopolitically speaking, from the Euro-Atlantic course. And the last surveys and the public opinion polls once again illustrate that Georgia remains as the stable pro-Western country despite of many internal challenges and difficulties. And this is, I think, the worst news for the Kremlin for the near future. This is the short, I would say, summary of the conclusional part of my article that was concentrated mainly on the outcomes of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict on Georgia. And as we're coming to an end and our discussion is almost done, once again, I would like to thank the Embassy of the Republic of Poland, the NATO Contact Point Embassy, for this initiative and the support. I would like to thank His Excellency, Mr. Mariusz Maszkiewicz, for his support. Also, I would like to once again use this opportunity to thank Mr. Mariusz Pietrzak for his great contribution. I'd like to thank all the authors who managed to write very, very interesting articles in 4 or 5 days, and taking into consideration the fact that it is the end of the year. I know that all of you have a lot of responsibilities and duties, but despite of this fact, you managed to do that. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank all the guests and colleagues who joined us during the discussion. Also, I'd like to express my gratitude towards the speakers, it means authors in this case. And thank you very much, dear friends. Again, if you'd like to add something or make any comments, please feel free. And if not, I would like to use this opportunity to wish you Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and better 2021 than it was 2020.
Grigor, let me thank all of you for the great contribution to understand what is going around, and we are very grateful for your efforts, for your long-term cooperation with not only Polish embassy, but the Western embassies, NATO and EU. And I think we could, delivering this set of articles in a paper form and I hope digital form, so we'll distribute it to many many experts and many people who are interested in these issues. We could deliver some important, let's say, contribution to to considering the situation and understand what is going on here. That's very grateful, and thank you very much, and hope for further cooperation.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We have hand raised from the guest of the Embassy of Azerbaijan. Please feel free to express your opinions.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. First of all, I'd like also to extend my gratitude for this opportunity, for this discussion, and to the representatives of the Georgian Scientific Society experts, as well as our Polish colleagues, for this bright event today. But it's maybe as a representative of the embassy. But at the same time, after this point, I'd like to add some few words, not as official person, but personal capacity as a PhD in political sciences. First of all, today's discussion, we observed real understanding that each conflict, each unresolved situation, maybe not inside Georgia, but some neighboring territories, definitely impact on Georgia and security in other countries abroad. So, first of all, I realized some maybe sorrow or regret and maybe very with grounds on some lack of Western presence, Western influence. And in this regard, I'd like to make these points due to Mr. Koberidze. As I said, it was a very good analysis and retrospective vision with description that if for decades these activities led by at the same time leading Western policymakers, if their activities for decades actually it was stressed failed. So we have a situation like the conflict can't be permanent. The peoples of the region, I believe that in Georgia the same situation have some limits of patience, and therefore the conflicts should be resolved. And each country, each family, also each subject can do his own homework. Some maybe to analyze mistakes, to assess the current situation, and to shape the most proper look forward. In this case, I guess that this situation in Nagorno-Karabakh region of the Republic of Azerbaijan and this current developments, they show very clearly that we have to, if we want to shape some collective security atmosphere and some structures, we should be more interdependent as we are, but at the same time we should communicate at the same language, with the same values, with same attitudes. And that's why it was also one remark that maybe alarmist remark regarding Turkey in one of the speakers' points, that Georgia is situated between Russia and Turkey. And I don't see the Turkish Turkey like a reason for threat to Georgia. If we look at, for example, even Bucharest, NATO Bucharest summit, as I see from that point up till today, Turkey is one of the strongest supporter of the Georgian membership, full membership in the desired structures of NATO. And as I see, during that summit in Bucharest, it was some other actors blocked potential Georgian and Ukrainian map. Therefore, I guess that in order to shape, we can't change our past, we can't even change our present today, but we can to shape most proper and most balanced approach and vision for prospects. That's why I realize it's my belief that every country should, as I see, do its own homework. First of all, should try to arrange issues of its national security most proper way, and we have some being in Azerbaijan, we have some not so negative but even more positive experience. It was our way to do. For Georgia, it's sure you could shape your own way to do, but at the same time, for the countries in the region, for Turkey, for Georgia, for Azerbaijan, for other neighboring countries, for Armenia also, we have to have some regional based behavior. We no one of these actors should be excluded in terms of their interests of the region. Only being inside and realizing that our South Caucasus, Black Sea or Black Sea Caspian region is our home, only in this case we would be able to create more bright future for each of us and for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your sum up of this event and the kind words. Once again, dear friends, thank you very much for spending these 3 hours together with us. Thank you very much for the participation, and I'd like to wish you all, first of all, the health, and once again, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot, Rico. Thanks you all.